I'm Bob Fechtman, and this is Janet Lowder. But before I say more, I've got to read some information about two of our sponsors. Our break sponsor is the Family Heritage Trust Company. The Family Heritage Trust Company provides personalized trust administration and investment management services, specializing in special needs trusts to help protect state benefits while ensuring beneficiaries maintain access to supplemental funds. As an independent corporate trustee, they have no minimum asset threshold and offer transparent flat fee services with no hidden costs, tailored to meet the unique needs of individuals and families. Our tote bag sponsor is the Midland Trust Company. Midland Trust Company is a full-service trust company that specializes in administering special needs trusts. Midland's commitment to clients is defined by four core attributes. Experience, excellence would be good too though, accessibility, personalized service, and compassion. Well, I'm going to start by saying that Janet was one of the reasons that I thought of doing this kind of interview format, because I'll never forget I had a wonderful dinner down at Stetson one night with Janet and Nell Graham-Sale and Ann Butenhoff, and if Mary O'Byrne had been there, I would have felt even more inadequate, because we were going around the table talking about all these great things we did in the 60s and 70s, and of course I was in grade school, but anyway, we're going around telling all these great stories, and I just thought these are amazing women and the stories they have to tell, and of course we know they're all great lawyers too. So I thought in particular of interviewing Janet today because I know she has an interesting life, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. But I also keep saying over and over again, and she disagrees with me, of course, because she's too modest, but Janet has the kind of law practice that we all wish we had. And not only is that true, but she practices really in every area that we all practice in. So you may focus more in one thing than the other, but Janet does it all. And I want to talk to her about how she got there and how she structures her law office. So I'm really not going to let us run out of time to do that. But I want to start, Janet, by asking you just a few questions about your childhood. I believe one of the things that you told me in preparation for this is that you had an interesting trajectory through school. I think maybe you went through a little faster than most of the rest of us.
Yeah, I was always really competing with my big brother, who's 2 years older than me, so I could read when I started school, so they skipped me through first grade. And then I became quite the hippie in my teenage years, and I was tired of high school back when they had dress codes, and I was always being sent home because I wasn't dressed appropriately, so I graduated a year early from high school. So I was like 16 when I started college, and 21, I think, when I started law school. And I was just always like trying to jump into everything. So at that point I was also married, and then found out a month into my first year of law school that I was pregnant.
So did you stay in law school, or did you have to drop out?
No, I dropped out after the first year when the baby was born. That first year of law school was like one of the worst years of my life that I remember. I'm there, I don't know, what were we back in the mid-70s? I was there 74, 75. And I think that women were maybe 12 to 14% of the law school students at that time. And all these other women, I guess they were working at law firms, but they were wearing little suits, and I'm there in my bell bottoms. And I don't think I was so bad that I was going to class barefoot, but that you can kind of see where I was. In college, I was trained by the Quakers to be a draft counselor during the Vietnam War. That's what really got me interested in law. It was my first exposure to statutes and regulations and helping people, trying to find loopholes in the regulations to help people avoid the draft. And I still kind of do that with Social Security, SSI, Medicaid, look at those regulations and find the loopholes, to help our clients keep their benefits. But yeah, so anyway, my first year in law school, I'm this hippie. I had a Volkswagen bus. I was pregnant, I was exhausted, and I would go to class and I would go out to the Volkswagen bus and take a nap in between classes.
Have you seen they have a new electric version of the Volkswagen bus?
I did. I saw it at the car show.
It doesn't have a long range.
No.
But it's really cute.
Yeah, it is.
Would you think about getting one?
I don't know.
It wouldn't be the same.
It wouldn't be the same.
So how long were you out of law school before you ended up going back?
Well, 75 to 89. I ended up having 2 more children. Was a stay-at-home mom for a number of years. My first husband was an alcoholic, and my marriage was shaky, so I started thinking, okay, that was a miserable year of my life, but do I want to go back to law school? Because I could see the writing on the wall. I was going to be supporting my kids. So how I got into this area of law is kind of a funny story. I decided, I'll go get a job as a paralegal. And see, because when I went that first time, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no exposure to the law. Everybody in my family was in medicine, and it was like a foreign language to me. So I went for 2 interviews in one day. One was with Jones Day, which, as you all know, is a huge corporate firm. And the other was with my current partner who just retired, Frank Fechtman. He and 2 other guys had left legal aid and started a firm. And that was the job I took. And he had come to Cleveland, specifically Cleveland Legal Aid, to start the Mental Disability Law Project. It works with mental health and people with intellectual disabilities. So, you know, I loved what they did and was just fascinated by it. And I just shuddered to think what my life might have been like had I taken the job with Jones Day.
So as you started to work with him then, how long did it take before you were made a partner and making decisions about the firm, that sort of thing?
Well, when I started there, I was a paralegal, and that was when, that was in 84. They convinced me to that I should go back to law school, and I agreed, and went back at night from 89 to 92. So I graduated in 92, and they made me a partner right away, because I'd been with them for a long time.
Right away. So that's a pretty sweet deal. What do we have to do to make that happen? Just be as good as we were, no doubt. Now, when you started there as a partner, give me an idea of what a day in the life of you was at that time. What kind of work were you doing specifically? In 92, I had been working on doing estate planning and trust. Ohio had, well, they had this one attorney named Shirley Cochran, who everybody referred to as the trust buster. You know, that was back when parents of kids with disabilities had an ongoing obligation to support them through adulthood. And, you know, that changed, I think, sometime in the 80s, where it was acknowledged that once that child is 18, the parents shouldn't have to pay for all the services. The parents should be, you know, the child should be eligible for benefits. But boy, Ohio, the Department of Developmental Disabilities just attacked every trust. And so we were always trying to figure out how to draft trusts that would not get counted as a resource for the individual's benefits. And then, you know, a year after I graduated, OBRA 93 passed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. And so I started setting up special needs trusts, which is what they're called in Ohio regulations, a D4A trust, right away. And then having my discretionary third-party trusts instead just fund these special needs trusts, so that the individual wasn't a beneficiary of the third-party trust, and we didn't have to disclose them, and then they wouldn't get dragged into court and attacked. And at that point, too, I could see just the huge benefit of this, and we started what is now the biggest pooled trust
in Ohio, but I was kind of doing this all on my own. I didn't know anybody else in Ohio who was doing this, and I always felt like I was jumping off a cliff. And I'd go into probate court, and try and get the probate judge to approve a D4A trust. And he'd always pull me into his chambers, and he'd say, if we put all this money into one of these trusts you want to use, and the person stays on Medicaid, we're going to be on 60 Minutes. Mark my words, they'll be interviewing us on 60 Minutes. And I'm trying to tell them, it's a federal law. This is allowed. It's acceptable. But so I continued just doing a lot of trust work. And
you were doing this all yourself. You didn't have anybody else guiding you in it. That's incredible. Now, I know you have worked a lot with the trial lawyers and structured settlement people over the years. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of how did you get into that? If we're not already into that, what can we be doing that was really helpful for you in terms of working with that cohort?
I think, in the 90s when we were starting to do these, we were starting to work with them, and they were understanding the value of it, and did a lot of speaking at the Ohio Trial Lawyers Association, which is now Ohio Association for Justice, and our local Trial Lawyers Association. So they understood the benefits to their clients really early on, and we'd work on it, but we couldn't always get probate judges to approve these early on. They just were so suspicious of them. I mean, I remember one probate judge in a different county who said, well, if I go to jail for doing this, you're going to be the first person I call. And I said, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you call me. But I said, go for it. But he approved it. So just working with them and giving presentations and having some really great successes, trying to get these guys to bring me in early in the case. So, if it's a married adult, we could maybe get the injured person on a waiver before all this money, came in, and so the allocation to the spouse would not impact the benefits. I mean, there were a lot of, and even with kids, trying to get them on waivers, and so that things just could be structured better. And developed a great relationship with the Attorney General, who has headed up the Medicaid estate recovery department in Ohio for a number of years, since way back then, who promised me he would not retire until I did. Then he retired, but he came back. So, it's been...
The guilt got to him. Because he promised you.
Yeah, I would remind him every time I happened to run into him, yeah.
So I think I heard you say, I know I did, you joined the Trial Lawyers Association in your state, and you started speaking for them.
Yeah.
How do you go about convincing them to let you speak?
Well, back then, back in the 90s, there was really nobody else doing this, at least in Ohio, that I knew of. I mean, our game, we were kind of the only game in town at that point. And I would convince them to let me speak by saying, if you don't look at these issues when you're settling a case, you're going to be liable for malpractice because this person's going to lose these benefits. And in fact, one of the lawyers, a big PI attorney in Cleveland, did not do a D4A trust for a settlement for a guy who was, semi-comatose in a nursing home, and it wasn't a huge settlement, but it was gone in about 5 years. It was down to almost nothing, and the mother came to me, and I didn't take the case, but I referred it out, and he was actually sued for not considering this in the settlement, and had to make good on the amount of the settlement that had been spent when this kid's care would have all been taken care of by Medicaid. And the probate judge was deposed in that case, and he wasn't happy about that. The same judge who kept telling me we'd be on 60 Minutes. So.
Well, you said something that was very interesting to me earlier because I think I've always felt like third-party special needs trusts are a breeze because they don't seem to care much about them, but that wasn't your situation in Ohio. Is it still like that? Is Ohio difficult to work with on third-party special needs trusts?
No, back in, I'm not sure which year, but in the early 2000s, we actually got into statute the requirements for a trust not counting. Before that, it was in the regulations, and Job and Family Services would change those regulations like every year or two, so that we never knew, what it was going to be that would make a trust countable or not countable. And then, Bill Browning had a couple of really good cases where he took it up to the Ohio Supreme Court, and then we got this into statute. So it's very clear now what you have to do to make a third-party trust not countable. So.
Now, what about once that happened and you knew you could do a lot of these third-party special needs trusts? What's your best marketing tip on that? How do you drive the clients to your firm for third-party special needs trusts?
Well, like I said, back early on, we were kind of the only game in town, and my firm is interesting because my partner, Frank Fechtman, he represented all of the county DD boards, or he represented the association that represented all the county DD boards. He was very active in drafting legislation and drafting regulations. So he always knew what was coming down the pike in the state in terms of services available, eligibility requirements. And I mean, that was like wonderful because we could advise clients really well about what was out there, what was coming, what they needed to watch out for. We always had to put in our fee agreements and disclose that there was a potential conflict of interest, that if they wanted us to sue the DD board, that we couldn't take the case, or if they had a conflict with the DD board, so they knew up front. But that brought in lots of clients. And we also have a special ed attorney and a special education advocate, parent advocate in the firm. And there's a lot of cross referrals there because they are working with families, obviously, with kids. And a lot of those are younger kids. They're in elementary or junior high school, and parents haven't done planning, so that's a good source of clients as well.
Would you say the percentage of the work that you do that's in first-party special needs trusts?
The percentage?
Yeah, if you had to guess.
35%, maybe?
Me too, I think. What about third-party? Is that the rest, or do you do a lot of other work?
That's most of the rest. I mean, I do some elder law stuff and a little bit of Medicaid planning. And
I believe I remember that you were working with Medicare set-asides.
Yeah.
Much more than I've ever dreamed of doing. Can you give us an idea of what part of your practice is Medicare set-aside, and what do you do for clients?
Well, right now, if there's a Medicare set-aside, I refer them over to Elena in my firm, many of you know. She kind of focuses on those. When you're helping these guys with the settlement and you're working on protecting the benefits, if Medicare's involved, that's always something you've got to address. I mean, it's got to be looked at, and is it needed, and if so, how much needs to be put in it. So, doing the combination D4A trust with the sub-trust in it for the Medicare set-aside is a big part of that, representing the personal injury attorneys.
I'm usually pretty content to refer those kinds of things out to, let's say, Medivest or somebody else who does that, but you guys do it in-house. Have you found that that's really beneficial for you? Does it bring more clients in? Is it more profitable for you? Give me an idea about that. Why should I be doing what you're doing?
Well, I think the attorneys appreciate that we can address that for them. Now, we'll refer the administration of them to Medivest. Mm-hmm. And we have we have a group of nurses that will do the reviews of the medical records and stuff and tell us what needs to be put aside for the future medical care.
And these nurses, Janet, do they work for you or
No, we contract with them.
Okay, so you got a case, you need a nurse to review it, you hire that nurse just for that project.
Yeah.
Now that I mentioned that, give me an idea of what your office looks like. How many people do you have working there, and what kind of jobs do they do?
So we have, right now, 9 attorneys, although my partner who retired is of counsel, and he pretty much comes in for the monthly happy hours, not a whole lot more.
Monthly seems kind of stingy, Janet.
Hey, we close our office at 1 o'clock on Fridays in the summer.
Okay,
So.
all right, touche. So 9 attorneys, including Frank?
Yeah.
And what about support staff, paralegals and?
We have 4 full-time paralegals, 2 part-time paralegals. We have a social worker. This is always embarrassing. I kind of have to go around the office. We have 4 secretaries, a
4, 8,
bookkeeper.
10, 11, okay. So you have
2.
slightly more staff than you have attorneys.
Oh, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
more staff than attorneys.
Okay. And that's,
we have the parent advocate, we have a receptionist,
tell me more about what the parent advocate does.
The parent advocate is special ed. She goes to IEP meetings with families, and so she can do a lot of the basic work on a special ed case, and then if it's blowing up and we need to do due process or something, then she pulls in the attorney. Or if she just thinks having the attorney come into these meetings that it might help things move along, then yeah. But she does a lot on her own.
Well, like I said to you all before, you can tell that Janet's practice is across the board, and she's been doing it a long time, and she's got a lot of good advice for us about. Let's talk a little bit more about marketing, because I just want to know more about how you got to the point where you're doing all the things that you're doing, and you got all these clients coming in, and I'm sure you're booked all the time. What should we be doing to do more marketing? I don't think you really do a lot of marketing like billboards, or do you work with social media or anything like that?
We have somebody in the office. We actually have a part-time marketing person who does some social media stuff. I don't get involved in that at all. I don't think I've ever been on half of the things that are out there. I can go on Facebook, but that's about it. Part of what we do for marketing is just support a lot of the nonprofits that, provide services to our clients, sponsor a table, at their fundraisers.
I was just about to ask you about that, Janet, because I feel like now that I've been practicing a long time, I'm sure a lot of your business comes from word of mouth.
Yeah.
But then a lot of these clients are starting their own not-for-profits to deal with the housing issues we talked about this afternoon, or deal with other issues, and they all want you to give them money. So do you have an idea of what we should do about that? What do I say to these people? I can't give everybody $1,000. Can I?
Well, that's hard. And it's kind of hard to juggle, and I try and support, and probably this is backwards. I try and support the organizations that have the most of my clients in them. There's a half a dozen that I have a lot of clients who belong to and support those. Maybe I should be out supporting the ones where I don't have as many clients in order to get more clients, but so much is word of mouth. I've been trying to not take new clients for a while, and they call and they just beg the secretaries, and they say, no, I was told I have to see Janet, I have to meet with her, and they'll come to me, and so it's just being out there. Part of it is being out there for so many years, and starting out is kind of the only game in town. There's a lot of competition now.
But you were there first.
I was there first, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this group has been such a boon to my practice in terms of learning about everything, marketing, and I finally, when I joined this group, didn't feel like I was about to step off a cliff half the time because I'm out doing things that I think are okay, but yeah, so this group has been great.
For any of you that have joined in the last 15 years, you don't know that when we started the group, it was 100% marketing. It really was. We talked about it constantly, and Robert Fleming's not here to get my pat on his back, but I like the way he helped to change the organization to be more educational.
Yeah.
And of course, we still talk a lot about marketing, but not so much like we used to.
Yeah.
But you got some benefit from that early on, and now it's word of mouth, and this is a good transition to talking about we're all getting older, we're thinking about retiring. I know you're thinking about it. Mm-hmm. What can we be thinking about to, I don't know, anticipate retirement even 15 years in advance? What can we be doing? What have you done that's been successful? What have you been struggling with?
Well, I struggle with every bit of the retirement thing. I'm not very good at it. I'm really happy that now, I mean, we've had some turmoil in our firm and, you know, somebody leaving, COVID was hard, and, you know, we're now back to, we got some great younger attorneys who can handle my cases, and, you know, that's the big thing, is knowing you can leave and that things will go on, because that was one of the things that Frank and I always wanted to do. We've had a lot of conversations with bigger firms who wanted to merge with us or absorb us, I guess would be, and we decided not to do it. We like kind of having the niche that we're in, and it's really important to us that it continues. And I think that the younger attorneys who are with us are really, really committed to that, you know, keeping it going. And, you know, if you're not committed to the area of practice that we do, you don't stay in our firm very long, for sure. You've got to really want to do what we do, which is very rewarding, and you have to be a nice person.
So it sounds like the young lawyers are going to be the key for you.
Yeah.
And what do you think you're going to do to, because you alluded to this earlier, the clients call in and they say, I was told I need to work with Janet. So how do you turn them toward being comfortable working with your younger associate or younger partner?
Well, I often have, if it's a new client, I often have one of the younger attorneys come and sit in the meeting with me, and then they do the work, and, you know, I introduce them. I think it's getting to the point where I'm just going to say, period, no new clients. I'm not taking any new clients, and that's all you have to say to people is she's not taking new clients. But we have some great attorneys here who can help you, and I'm hoping that that's going to move me towards retirement a little faster.
Then I guess I need to go back a year and ask you a year ago when you weren't thinking I'm not going to take new clients. Was one of the things you were doing is pushing the new clients out further on your calendar? And if so, what have you found as the breaking point on that? Because the clients aren't going to wait 6 months, are they?
No, I don't think I ever tried to push them out 6 months, but I mean, a lot of clients will say, I'll wait, 3-4 months.
Yeah. Now you do some crisis Medicaid planning?
Yeah.
And those people can't wait 6 months. Then they're going to have to meet with somebody else.
Yeah, but I don't do the work on those. I just take the cases because...
Meet with the clients, formulate the plan, and then somebody else takes it from there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, that would be a wonderful way to practice, wouldn't it? Just meet with the clients. I think, is Lawrence in here? Isn't that how you work,
I was going to say,
Lawrence?
maybe one of these years I'll interview Lawrence, because I know that's exactly what he does.
Yeah, you meet with the client, you get them to sign on, and then that's it. It's all somebody else. So I am I'm trustee of a lot of trusts in Ohio. You can't be a trustee unless you are a registered trust company or an individual. So I am individually a trustee on a lot of trusts, and I'm also power of attorney for a lot of my elderly clients who don't have family. And, you know, I think I want to keep on doing those things. The paralegals do all the work on the trusts that we administer. I don't do much. But,
Is there anyone else in your office who does the fiduciary practice like you do?
yeah, Ethan Welch, my youngest partner,
Okay.
does it.
Now, what percentage of your time is taken up with the fiduciary work that you do?
Not very much, because the paralegals have most of the contact with the clients. I mean, they have regular contact with the beneficiaries. Our social worker goes out to visit the beneficiaries, and our bookkeeper cuts the checks, and I sign them. So only if there's something, you know, that comes up. I don't have any of these people like with rats in their walls and stuff like you do, or drug manufacturing facilities in their garages.
We haven't had rats in the wall, but I think you might have just jinxed me on that. Yeah.
Oh, was it hamsters? I don't know. Anyway, I've been fortunate that, now I did have clients who, they called me up and said they were living somewhere else, and we asked why they had moved, because the trust had purchased the house. And unlike the panel that was just up, in Ohio, we don't have to notify Medicaid if we're making a big expenditure out of a first-party trust. And we often have the house held in the guardianship of the estate. So nobody can sell it or mortgage it without court approval, so it's protected. But we do that to protect it for the family, especially when, you know, the kids are young and they don't have much life expectancy. So we do that a lot. And in this case, I think it was in the guardianship of the estate, but we said, why have you moved? And she says, well, because the house burned down. And like, when did the house burn down, and why haven't you told us this? And it had burned down. We were just a month shy of the time limit to file an insurance claim on the house. So, I mean, this was a weird case. We don't usually lose track of beneficiaries like that.
Yeah, but not, well, I was just going to ask about that. What do you do in terms of property management? You're the trustee, maybe you own the house. Even if the family owns the house, you're at least peripherally responsible for it because you're the one with the money.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that the houses are not falling down around the people who are living there because they don't know how to take care of a house?
You have clients that don't know how to take care of a house.
Absolutely,
yeah.
I do.
Yeah. There's a big nonprofit in Cleveland that does property management for, I don't know, dozens, maybe hundreds of group homes in the city that, so, you know, that's their job. They manage these things, and we contract with them. So they go out and do quarterly inspections on the house, and they will do the repairs, and we know we can trust them. We know they do good work, and if we need to modify, we usually bring them in or, you know, use some of their contractors to get the work done. So that works out pretty well for us.
Do you have any idea of what the cost is per case to have that kind of work done?
The quarterly inspections are not very expensive, and I can't remember.
And then let's say they need $30,000 worth of stuff done around the house. Is that something they will kind of be the general contractor for? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then do they charge a percent, or how do they charge more for that, right? To be that involved in a project like that?
Yeah, they will charge something, but they're very reasonable. And the one really good thing about them is they know how to access Medicaid. So if there are home modifications or something where the waiver will kick in, you know, they know how to get that money. And so
I told you
it's a
guys this would
win-win.
be great. I mean, listen to this stuff. That's really good. Tell me a little bit more about, well, before I get into that, I just want to ask, you said that the trust administration and other fiduciary practice doesn't take much of your time, but what portion of your overall revenue does it bring in?
It's the most profitable thing I do.
Yeah, me too. I know we're talking to Janet, not me, but I've gotten to the point where my trust business is bringing in about 70% of my overall revenue, and it's taking me, sorry about that, it's taking me much less than 70% of my time.
Yeah.
So if you are willing to put in the time and effort, because there is time and effort involved, isn't there?
Yeah,
Getting
there
the
is.
practice set up so that it works smoothly and bringing the business in and so forth. But it can be the most profitable part of your firm if you let it.
Yeah, it definitely is the most profitable part of mine.
Now, I know I've been thinking that maybe even when I'm done being a lawyer, that I might continue to be a trustee for a while. Have you ever thought about that?
I have. As I said, I'm trying to figure out how to retire, and I've thought that maybe those are the cases that I would retain, and I could probably just go in one day a week and do what's needed, or, if my paralegals are very good. They know when things are going on that they need to consult with me, and, I'd be available. I might be out in Seattle with my grandkids, but be available by phone.
Why not?
So, yeah, that is what I've actually been thinking about as a retirement plan.
You got grandkids on the other coast too, don't you?
New Jersey.
Yeah. So you're in the air a lot.
Yeah, I've got what do they call it? Premier status with Alaska Airlines because I fly out to Seattle so often.
Oh, that's great. I want to ask you more about the trust business because that's a big part of my firm too, and I'm just trying to figure out some things for myself, frankly. But give me an idea of the way your office staff functions in managing those trusts for you. I call them trust administrators. What are they called in your office?
Well, they're paralegals, and actually most of the trusts that we administer are under probate court supervision. So, not only do we have all these decisions to make, but we have to get court approval for everything. And so these are...
Everything?
Well, most everything. I mean, we have a budget. We can operate within a budget, but anything outside of that budget, we've got to go get court approval.
And do you have to post a bond?
In some of them, I post a bond. In some, I deposit in lieu of bond. I mean, it kind of depends on how active the trust is going to be.
And do you have to do accountings?
Yes.
Court accountings? Annually, biannually?
Every 2 years in most counties.
I like to do them annually myself because it's just nice to have them approved by the court once a year, and then I'm not worried about it for an extra year. Not that I really worry about it, but you said something earlier that doesn't jibe with what you just told me. I thought you said for the big purchases you don't often have to ask for the court approval.
Oh, no, that wasn't court. We don't have to ask Medicaid.
Oh, you don't have to ask Medicaid?
If it's from a D4A trust, we don't have to notice anybody in the
Okay.
state or in the Medicaid agency.
That's great.
So we can purchase a house, title it in the beneficiary's guardianship, and nobody lifts an eyebrow about it.
But I'll bet you see your involvement with the court as a positive thing like I do. Not only do I think then every time I file an accounting or get approval to pay for something that I don't have to worry about it, I got it approved.
Right.
But I also don't have to worry about what people might think. Am I going to be the next Shane Service? Or you had a lady, at least one lady in your area who was stealing money from trust, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. And they were the worst D4A trust I had ever seen. I don't know how she got.
So they were
pulled in on
bad
this.
trusts anyway.
It was a big settlement against somebody. I don't even remember what it was. Yeah, and she drafted these D4A trusts, and most of them were court supervised, and she would just move money out of one trust into the other trust to show it was there for the accountings, and she's in jail now.
That's more or less exactly what Shane Service was doing in Indiana. He'd set up a new trust. It was like a shell game or a Ponzi scheme where he'd take the money from the new trust and he'd move it over to one of the old trusts in time for an accounting.
Yeah.
But he also wrote these trusts, and maybe this is what you were talking about. He wrote these trusts where he said to the judge, and the judges would sign them, that the judge had no authority over the trust and that he didn't have to do accountings. And so my comment about all of this to you is if you're thinking about a fiduciary practice, I think you should take Janet's advice and my advice, and it's okay to have court involvement. and I welcome it, and I don't mind having a bond, and I don't mind doing accountings, and
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to steal the money anyway, but now there's no implication that I might, because I really couldn't.
Yeah.
If I was desperate to get money, it would be hard for me to get the money without somebody finding out pretty fast.
Early on, back in the late 90s, I hated the court supervision because, first of all, judges didn't want to set these trusts up, and then they were so stingy with approving expenditures. Even if they were important expenditures for the benefit of the beneficiary, it's like they were always, especially my judges in Cuyahoga County, they were always thinking about the payback to the state and, preserving this money to go back to the state. They were very pro-Medicaid back then. But we have new judges now.
Well, you could tell them the trust is supposed to be for the sole benefit of this person, so we better spend it during their lifetime.
Right.
Or
right.
it won't be for their sole benefit.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming close to the end, so I guess I want to ask you something a little bit slightly off the topic. Do you feel that there have been any particular challenges for you as a woman in law over the years that you've been in law, and do you have any advice to other women in the room about ways that they might be able to learn something from you?
I think there's more women lawyers now than there are men. Isn't
And that's
that
true of doctors too, right?
53%. I haven't had any challenges. Now, the first time I went to law school at Case Western Reserve, the big organization was the Law Students' Wives Club, and not that had I been a law student wife, I would have joined that club, not with my political leanings and stuff at the time, but I really haven't.
Great.
So I don't have a lot of advice, and I don't think women need it anymore. And maybe some of you have experienced otherwise, but for me, it's been fine.
That's great. Well, do any of you have any questions for Janet? We've got 2 minutes and 21 seconds left. Oh, I see a couple in the front row here. Oh, here comes Jennifer with the microphone. She doesn't run like Scott.
My question's short. How many trusts do you serve as trustee for?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to guess maybe 30 or 40.
So, Janet, I have a question about your experience as a legal assistant and paralegal before practicing. I was in the same boat. And at Fleming and Curdy, we have really struggled to train legal assistants and paralegals. Historically, what happens, I think, is the attorneys are very prepared to take on work themselves. And we might have 1 or 2 legal assistants or paralegals that are really trained, but we've been welcoming more onto our staff. And I'm struggling because I was trained a certain way, and I'm wondering what you think are some of the successful techniques that we can help our staff when we consider educating them. That's really a boost to our clients and our firms. But I think having that legal assistance experience is really unique.
Yeah, and I came into a law firm of 3 former legal aid attorneys who had 1 secretary, and I was the first paralegal that had ever been there, and it's like, oh my God, I have this probate stuff, I don't know what I'm doing, figure this out. So, I had absolutely no training. I learned everything pretty much on my own, and we've discovered that doesn't work so well for a lot of employees. Our paralegals are very specialized. So we have probate paralegals who do probate work and work with the trust administration. Then we have Medicaid paralegal and estate planning. Well, she's a legal assistant, I guess. But we really have been fortunate so for the probate, we have hired very experienced probate paralegals. So we've not had anybody kind of green coming into that, and we really haven't had to train them. It's more training on our systems and our timekeeping system and practice management and all of that kind of stuff. So that's not a very helpful answer, but.
I have an interesting perspective on that, Elizabeth, because when I started working for Scott Severns, I was trained mostly by the paralegals. They taught me how to do a Medicaid application. They taught me how to prepare all the estate planning documents given our document preparation system. And I don't know, maybe that's a tip, is to really empower the paralegals even to train your new attorneys, and then they've really got to know what they're talking about if they're going to be training the attorneys.
Yeah, well, that's how ours are. The probate, we have a new attorney who comes in and doesn't know the probate. They learn it from the paralegals. The paralegals know so much more about probate than I do. I mean, I've forgotten more than I think.
I think we've got one more question there in the back.
Janet, thanks for sharing with us. I was just wondering if there was a meth lab in the house that caused that fire that you're talking about.
We never figured that out. I think it was a faulty stove, actually, but.
From where they were cooking meth. Yeah. That's where it was.
I would personally just like to thank Janet. Before I even went into private practice, I was a magistrate at our local probate court, and we got these pleadings for special needs trust, and my judge, who was a great judge, but he didn't want to have to figure all this out. He was on his, way out on retirement, and she was the one who got me interested in the first place, just because I had to do the research for the judge to figure out what these new things were.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Judge Clunk.
Yeah, Judge Clunk. He was a great judge.
Well, thank you, Janet. I appreciate you
Thank you, Bob.
allowing me to interview you.